Good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. We're going to keep looking through the book of Matthew. Last week, we looked at Matthew's response when Jesus called him, that his response was so simple. He just got up and followed. It wasn't complicated, he didn't overthink. He just acted in faith and he followed Jesus. We're going to look at another aspect of Matthew as we're introduced to him in chapter 9. Not just his response, but who he was. So let me keep reading out of Matthew chapter 9. I'll start in verse 9 just to remember what we looked at last week. But it says this: As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and he followed him. Now later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. Now that should tell us something right away. That the category that tax collectors were with were these people with bad reputations and people not regarded highly by society. Now, when the Pharisees saw this, and remember the Pharisees are the religious leaders of the law and of society and culture, looked at as the holy ones. So when a Pharisee saw this, they asked the disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with such scum?" Right? And different translations translate that differently. But I hope you could get the feel that tax collectors were not liked. Tax collectors weren't liked because they basically took advantage of people. So as they took money from their people, from their brothers and sisters, to give to Rome, to give to this power, this nation that was over Israel at the time. But at the same time, they would come up with some of the taxes on their own. So maybe you only had to pay $5 in taxes, and they'd say, well, the tax is $8, and $3 would go into their pocket as well. So you could see that in many angles, they were not liked in society at all. They weren't regarded highly at all. They weren't good people in general. And Jesus chose one of them, Matthew. And even as Matthew chose to follow Jesus and he gathered people into his house, the people he gathered were people like him. So we could see what type of people he connected with. And this isn't to say anything about Matthew, but it's a lot more to say about Jesus and about how he views us. That there's nothing that we could do that would cause Jesus to want to look beyond us. When Jesus looks down on us, he sees us as his creation, and he also sees incredible potential in our lives if we would begin to align our lives with him and simply follow him. That whatever it is you're doing now, whatever job you're in the middle of, whatever part of school you're in the middle of, or maybe you're balancing them both, whatever your family dynamic is right now, or even if you're retired, and just we are living life now. I think Jesus wants to look down upon us in the same way he did Matthew and say, you have so much potential. Just get up and follow me. And there's nothing about us that Jesus would look down and say, you're not good enough. I mean, I even remember growing up, I had a speech problem and I couldn't say certain letters, certain words properly because I had hearing problems, and I would hear certain letters wrong or I wouldn't hear them at all. So when I would get to that letter in a word, I would say it wrong. And I'd go to speech therapy for a little less than a year to try to fix that. Now, I don't really remember what that was like. I don't remember how I felt about it, but I do look back and say, how in the world could I be speaking up in front of people speaking when I had to learn how to speak, right? And why would Jesus choose me to do something like that? And that's just the question that we should all wrestle with, because we don't know, but we do know that Jesus chooses us to do things that are bigger than us. If we would do what Matthew did, to not get hung up on who we are, to not get hung up on our shortcomings, but to simply get up and follow. And Jesus will lead us into the most amazing life that we could ever experience. And I hope that as we think about Matthew, we don't just think about his response, but we think of who he was and all of the baggage he could have potentially had coming into a life like this. He was a tax collector. He took money from people. And here he is following the Messiah, choosing to align his life with Jesus's values and to be changed. And that is what God desires the most for us. God bless.